Hey folks, Alan MandicReally here. In this video, we're heading to Joel Telling, yes, 3D printing nerds, YouTube studio. Well, Jean's not coming with. Sorry, baby girl. In exactly 1 week, I'm jumping on a plane here in Philadelphia and jetting off to the Pacific Northwest to build a Voron 2.4 with my buddy Joel Telling. I've got a lot of prep work here in the studio to do before then. Hold on there, Alan. We've built the Voron at this point, and it was an absolute adventure, wasn't it, Joel?
That was quite a journey to go on.
I'm going to continue with this video showing my preparation for building this machine, and then we're going to come back and discuss what all went wrong with all of that. So stay tuned. We are going to be building a Voron 2.4 350mm 3D printer from an LDO kit. Thank you, Jason at LDO. And we're aiming to do it in 2, maybe 3 days. So I need to get as many ducks in a row before I get on that plane as I can. Let's start off, since it's Pi Day, with setting up Klipper on a Raspberry Pi. Step 1 is grabbing a good quality SD card out of my stash of them here. I head over to the computer, load up the SD card, open up the Raspberry Pi imager. I'm going to choose my OS, go into the other specific use OSs, 3D printing, and the first one on the list is what I want, Mainsail. I personally prefer the Mainsail web interface, so this is going to get me Mainsail and Klipper installed easily. Back over at the workbench, I've got the SD card and I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 2GB model. It's not a powerhouse, but it's plenty for a Voron 2.4. Normally, of course, this would already be installed in the 3D printer and powered off of the power supply that's going to be running it for the long term. But I'm trying to cut corners and save time when it comes to the build. So I'm going to power it off of a power supply here at the bench from Kit and just fire it up. I've got the power LEDs to tell me that this thing is on, and I should be able to use a SSH client to remote into the Raspberry Pi.
Once I had remoted in, I was able to install COW, the Klipper installation and update helper. This allowed me to update everything and get Klipper screen installed for the touchscreen interface.
Without having the Pi attached to the MCU that's going to be in the machine and being able to jog the machine around and actually run tests on it, that's as far as I can go right now, which means it's time to talk about the printed parts. The Voron team is providing us printed parts via the Printed Forward program for this project, so we can get everything we need to put this together. However, I have trust issues, and the last thing I want to do is get to Seattle and realize we have to print a whole bunch of parts to finish this project out. Not like Joel doesn't have 3D printers to make that happen, but I just want to get as much out of the way as I can before we get there. Also, the LDO Rev C kit that we're using includes components for a lot of mods for the Voron 2.4 that I really like, such as the Nevermore charcoal air filter system, the Klicky bed probing system, and a 4.3-inch touchscreen from Big Tree Tech. So I wanted to get those parts and be sure I had them, and there's also prep work that needs to be done on those. I might as well do that here before I jump on a plane and head out. And I also did some aesthetic touches that I'll show you in a second. First thing I'm going to tackle is putting some heat press inserts into random components that need them. I can do this here. There's no reason to waste the time when we're there working on the build if I can get it out of the way now. So I'm just going to fire up my soldering iron and put a handful of heat press inserts in. The next thing that I can get done here and now is magnets. 6mm by 3mm magnets. A handful of the components for this project, namely mods, use this size of magnets. That's why I have so many of them. So I'm going to be pressing them in and gluing them into place. I'm using a little dab of CA glue in each hole that I'm pressing a magnet into so that I can then combine these components together. Such as the Nevermore charcoal air filter system, it has a chamber housing, which is where the fans go, and it has an actual canister where the charcoal goes. The two halves clip together with magnets. This makes it pretty serviceable because you can get underneath the bed and pull this out from underneath of there, and it can spread the heat from underneath the bed around the chamber to keep the chamber more actively heated, sort of. Then there's the Klicky bed probe system. I really like this little setup, and it's got a great implementation and use of magnets. It uses them for parking the tool head in its little docking station, for attaching to the tool head itself, and it even uses them in a unique way as electrical conductors. The one half of the system has an Omron switch mounted to it, and that switch contacts two magnets. The other half of the system mounts to the tool head. So while this machine is printing, the switch is not on the tool head, so it's reducing weight and it's just out of the way. But when it's docked to the tool head, it attaches. Now those magnets are touching, and on the other side there are wires attached to the magnets so that those are now a quick connection system that you don't have to worry about lining up or plugging in properly. The magnets do the job for you. I had hoped to wire up the fans in the Nevermore chamber setup, but I only have a couple of fairly low quality 5015 fans around, and I was worried they might be a little noisy, so I'm going to wait till I get to Seattle and wire up the ones that come with the LDO kit for the Nevermore. Now, with as much done here in my studio in Philadelphia as I feel like I can manage and have the time for, it's time to start packing this stuff up, grab a couple of tools to bring with me, and head off to Seattle to build a Voron with 3D Printing Nerd. Let's go do it, folks. In preparation for this project, I printed up a handful of the parts we needed for it with my own little flair. I put a little remix on some of the parts we're going to be using. And I also worked with another creator on something I'll show you in a second.
Oh, all right.
But let's get to...
I'm kind of excited with what's going on here.
Let me... a couple of skirts, custom skirts for this project. So...
Ooh, look at that.
Yeah.
That looks nice. And skirts are the decorative piece that kind of go along the bottom and really ripe for customization, right?
Exactly. So filled in some of the holes, put the Voron logo in that one.
Yeah.
And then the other side one,
look at
I
that.
put 3D Printing Nerd logo in.
Look at that.
Yes.
That's amazing. Oh, I love this. Look at you. Look at that. Oh, and it fits.
Yes.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course. Of course.
That bezel that I showed you earlier, I remixed that as well.
Ooh.
So
nice, and it's got a smooth, so not a textured plate. You print that on a
PEC sheet. PEC sheet. Yep.
Yep. Nice and smooth.
That's
Look at that.
It's a little sacrilege, but I printed most of these parts on the Bamboo X1 because I wanted to multicolor them. I know Voron folks are going to hate me for that, but
it's fine. Hey, you know what? You makers find a way.
It's the tool that worked for the job.
It's the tool for the job. Oh, this looks great. Here, check that out.
LDO logo, little hexes and stuff. So I'm going to be releasing that design to the public.
Ooh.
I had the idea for this, but then a fellow creator, I don't know if you know him, Chris Stankiewicz, K to the Stank on TikTok and some of the other.
I think so. That sounds familiar.
You've seen his work. I'm 100% sure.
I'm pretty sure.
We created you a stealth burner with a Joel bot in the middle.
Whoa!
So
that's not easy to do. Like,
no.
That logo's got some detail in it.
There's a lot of detail. It's not the best print because some of those lines are literally 0.4 wide.
I know.
So doing it with a 0.4 nozzle, I swore I had a 0.25 millimeter nozzle for my X1, but I couldn't find it. So I used 0.4, but I still think it turned out pretty cool.
Oh, this is great. Check that out. Look at that. That's a lot of fun right there.
Yes.
Oh man, that's gonna look great on this machine.
Yes. So we got your Joel bot,
Ellen,
the centerpiece of it, and this is half of the housing that holds the hot end. So in this build, we're using the E3D Revo.
That's right. I was gonna say that looks like Sanjay.
Yep. The Voron team actually did that. That's not me.
Look at that.
The Voron team put a little Sanjay in the middle of that.
That's freaking amazing, dude.
I did print this one multicolor on my Voron V0.
Ooh,
so
okay.
I wanted to use the Voron as much as I could for this.
That makes sense.
Just the multicolor stuff.
Yeah.
Now we can get back to work.
Okay. Back to work.
We went on to build a Voron 2.4, and the build went pretty well overall, but we absolutely had some issues. Now, Joel did a dedicated video about the build showing some of the behind the scenes. You should really go check that out to learn more about it. He didn't really cover the issues we ran into, though. I don't blame him at all. They were mostly our own faults or mistakes, so let's dive into them here. The first mistake I need to point out is that I didn't film enough footage while I was in Joel's studio, and the footage that I did film I lost a bit of. I did manage to produce a full studio tour checking out around Joel's space, so you could see a full behind the scenes in that video there if you haven't already checked it out. But as far as the issues I'm about to discuss, I don't have as much B-roll as I would usually like to have. I'm sorry. So we got the machine fired up.
Voron V2.4, 350 LDO Kit, MandicReally 3D Printing Nerd collaboration. It's ready to go in 3, 2, 1. Ha ha ha! I saw lights.
We got power on.
Is there anything on the screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
And the screen didn't light up. What was effectively happening was the Raspberry Pi was not booting into its operating system when we tried to turn the machine on. We kind of overcorrected trying to troubleshoot this issue. We swapped out Raspberry Pis for 2 other ones we had on hand, and they all exhibited the same issue. So then we restarted, went back to the original Pi, and did what we probably should have done to begin with. Unplug everything from it except the power going to it, and see what happened. It booted. Then we started plugging things back into it one by one. We found that when we plugged the screen, the Big Tree Tech 4.3-inch touchscreen, into it, it wouldn't boot. We assumed we probably had a bad screen and we could operate it without the screen through a laptop, so let's move on. LDO actually sent Joel a new screen, and then he discovered that he was able to get the original one working. I still don't know exactly how he did that. Maybe he can chime in the comments down below and let us know, because I intend to install that screen on my machine too, so I'd like to know. Then we started testing everything, making sure the end stop switches were working, making sure we could heat up and cool down the hot end, the fans were working, and everything was going good until we tried to Z home. Joel's machine, the same as mine, uses a nozzle probe at the back edge of the bed. It comes down and it touches the nozzle to that probe to click a switch and tell it this is Z home. That didn't work off the bat. Thankfully, we were following the Voron startup instructions, so we didn't crash into that. I discovered it by trying to actuate the switch manually and found it wasn't working. This was a super honest and basic mistake. The plug on each end of the cable that goes to that switch is the same connector, but it's pinned differently. We just had it flip-flopped end to end of which way it was plugged in. Once that was corrected, we could Z home, but then came with a Klicky Probe. This is the first time I ever set up the Klicky Probe, so I am certain everything from here on out is probably my fault, but I do have one complaint about the kit related to it. I fully intend to put the Klicky Probe on my 2.4 and my Mercury 1 build, and I had really hoped I'd have a chance to do that before I went out to Seattle, but I didn't. The first issue we ran into was nobody's fault, and it was just stupid. I tried to actuate the switch and see that the firmware was registering the change of input, and it wasn't. When I assembled that here in my studio, I used a genuine Omron D2F switch that I had in stock. It was apparently bad out of the box. We removed it, replaced it with the switch included with the LDO kit, and that worked perfectly fine. Then it came time to set up the config and macros for Klicky Probe, and that's where it all went wrong. Now, the LDO kit includes various mods for Voron, and Klicky Probe is one of them. When it comes to that mod, they point you in their supplemental instructions to the GitHub for the Klicky Probe, which I found the instructions on the GitHub extremely confusing or lacking on telling me how to set it up. This is the point where some of you out there are probably yelling at your screen that I'm an idiot for not knowing how to do this because I've never done it previously, but I just wasn't having a good time trying to configure this thing to get it to pick up the probe and use it for probing. What I ended up doing to fix it was using a config file provided to me from another Voron 2.4 owner, Mark Little Ferris, thank you, changing the parameters to fit our 350 build that we had and exactly where the dock for the probe was, and that worked and got us up and running. And this is probably the only complaint I have about the LDO kit, is when it comes to that Klicky Probe, they send you to the GitHub page and you're kind of on your own from there. Almost every other thing involved with the kit and the components in it is either already in their example config file that they provide to you, or calls out better instructions in their supplemental instructions, but not the Klicky Probe. Don't get me wrong, I understand that between sizes of machines and which dock and components you print for the Klicky Probe, that things are going to be different. I get that. But I don't think it's out of the question for them to say, here are the printed parts we recommend, and here is an example config to work with those. If you don't follow these guidelines, we are not responsible for what happens. Now, don't get me wrong, I was really impressed with the LDO kit. I liked the parts they chose to include, including the mods. I felt that everything was really top quality. Even the supplemental instructions they did provide were excellent. Just this one thing where they kind of fell down. If somebody asked me today what Voron 2.4 kit I would recommend, I would wholeheartedly say the LDO kit. The last issue we ran into was some odd reason the machine forgot the Z offset. We did a Z offset adjustment on it, and then we moved forward and we ran the Klicky Probe for a full functional run. It operated as it was supposed to, went to start a print, and the nozzle jammed into the bed. At that point, Joel and I looked at each other. I had to hit the road, and we both said, high five. Goodbye. Clearly, Joel has got the machine running. He's got it printing, and he seems to be loving it. I was honestly kind of worried we were going to go through all this trouble, and he really wasn't going to like the machine, but I'm really happy to see that he genuinely is excited and loving it. I've been getting text message updates, and it's so awesome. But I think that's where we're going to wrap it up for this one, folks. If you want to join in on Joel's excitement for the Voron, go check out his full dedicated build video over here, or you can check out my studio tour to see behind the scenes of Joel's studio with this video over here. Be sure to get subscribed to ensure your 3D prints don't fail. It's not a guarantee, but it can't hurt. Thanks for coming around, folks.